Hey, folks, welcome back to the podcast. This is your host, Ryan Kennedy, and I am really excited for today's episode with my guest, Jason Drees. He's an entrepreneur, a coach, an author, a husband, father of 4 boys, and this dude has done over 10,000 coaching sessions in his career. And he's developed this framework, this proven framework, that's a process to remove resistance to the success of people that he works with to really unlock these amazing results. And I learned about your work, Jason, through one of my patients, and I've really enjoyed your podcast. I've really enjoyed your book. And so I'm super stoked to have you on the show today. And I'd like to get things kicked off with a little bit of background on how you got started in this field. Were you just a young guy, like trying to crack the code on mindset and human psychology?
No, no. Great. Thanks for the invitation to be here, Ryan. No, young guy. I'm 49 years old, and I didn't start coaching until almost about 10 years ago, actually, 2013. So I was in professional sales and technology for quite a while, and then in 2008, I started a startup company with a coworker of mine that manufactured race car driver cooling suits. These suits that like pump cold water over to the clothing and cooled people. So we did that, and along the way, I hired a Tony Robbins coach, and because I was running a company, I had no idea what to do. It was brand new running a company, so I hired a Tony Robbins coach. And about a year later, that coach had actually asked me, "Have you ever thought about becoming a coach?" I'd listened to Tony Robbins content before, and went to UPW. I went to Date with Destiny, and then when he asked me that question, it felt like I got struck by lightning. Like, it literally, that question changed my life. Like, have you ever thought about becoming a coach? And that was in 2012. And I was like, no, but that's a great question. And literally in that moment, I realized I'm like, I can become a coach. And I decided I was going to become a coach. And literally within like 6 months, I was in Tony Robbins' coach training program.
Oh, wow. Wow. And so you went through his training program and then just started your business and kind of walk me through the journey. Cause I know with coaching, especially, a lot of people run into imposter syndrome and who am I to be telling people, this type of advice and how to live when, I think we're all still trying to figure shit out, in our own lives.
Yeah. Well, we're never, there's never an end to figuring stuff out, right?
Exactly.
So in 2013, I was like in tech sales, and then I left tech. Basically got laid off from my tech job, right? As our second son was being born, right? That month. And then also got into Tony Robbins coach training. So it was like, oh my God, here's your dream job. And then finding out it doesn't hardly pays anything. So it was a big financial struggle for the next, 2 to 4 years to kind of get income going, because it was, if you're a life coach working for someone else, you don't make that much money. So I just kept coaching. And along the way, I started to realize that there are better methods to coach people than results-based coaching. And what I didn't realize at the time is I was developing what I call alignment coaching. And, that was 2000, worked from Tony Robbins from 2013 to 2016. I took some other jobs on the side there. I was always coaching in the background by myself under Jason Drees coaching. And then I started working with this guy who has a beard, and I actually coached him for a year before I knew who he was. And then I was on the Bigger Pockets podcast, and all of a sudden my business exploded. And then I 10x'd the business. And in 2020, I tripled it next year, and basically went from just me to like 10 coaches working with me in about 18 months.
Incredible. Yeah.
So
can you outline the difference between those two options that you shared, results-based coaching and alignment coaching?
Yes. Right. So results-based coaching is the way most coaching is that I've seen, right? Most mindset coaching. There's tactical coaching methodologies like real estate coaching. They teach you the mechanics of a real estate transaction, right? But I'm talking in regards to mindset coaching, where we're not really teaching tactical. We're basically elevating the mindset of the client. And the way I learned to coach with Tony Robbins was results-based coaching. Okay, so what is the results you want? And then you diagnose why it's not happening from the action level, right? Action's not working. Are you taking the right action? Is there resistance to taking the right action? So a lot of times you end up holding the client accountable to taking action that they think they should take to get the result, right? I'm a real estate investor, and I wanted to get into real estate investing. And I'd be like, okay, what do you need to do? And they'd say, well, I need to find some off-market deals. And I'm like, okay, find some off-market deals. And they're like, what do I need to do? Like, they need to cold call. I'm like, okay, go cold call. And they're like, I don't like cold calling. I'm like, well, how are you going to find a deal? Well, I want to be an investor, but I don't like cold calling because I don't like rejection. And as a results coach, I would say, well, And if it was a man, I'd be like, what kind of dad are you going to be? What kind of man are you going to be? Right. So I would create negative resistance to force action, right? Which is technically using negative leverage to force misaligned action, which doesn't work. It works okay, right? And what I've discovered along the way is that action doesn't actually create our reality. Our reality actually creates our action. So when I flipped that backwards over the past like 3 years, the results in my life exploded, the results of my clients exploded. So basically, instead of focusing on diagnosing the misalignment from the action level upward, we start at the alignment level downward, because strategy comes from the action you take comes from your brain. And your brain, the thoughts you think, comes from the frequency of your thoughts. The frequency of your thoughts comes from you, right? And so what we do is, instead of starting at this level, we shift a mental environment in alignment with a target, which then creates an aligned mindset, aligned strategy, aligned actions. And then you're basically aiming at a target in the best possible way.
When you explain it like that, it makes sense. But it's so easy for people, and myself included. I was always under the impression like it's all about just knowing what to do and then freaking doing it. Those are the two pieces. Yeah. Those are the two pieces of the puzzle. That's all it really takes. If you know what to do and you do it, you get the outcome that you're after. But I learned the same thing, in that the mindset is even important component to achieving success and really cultivating this whole process. And so it's interesting to hear you break it down like that. I do like that kind of framework.
Yeah, because it's, if you know what to do, then you'll do it, right? That's not a problem. But most people who engage a coach want to do things they haven't done before. They want to grow their business. They want to start a new venture. They're basically going into the unknown where they don't know how to do it. That's where alignment coaching will get you there exponentially faster, because a lot of times when we start going into the unknown, aiming at bigger targets we don't know how to do, that's where intuitive guidance really comes into play. And your brain is really the socially conditioned computer that's cataloged everything in your life prior to now. So your brain is actually your biggest obstacle for doing impossible things, because it gets in the way. Whereas if you kind of dial into alignment with your intuitive guidance, then you start to get better direction and better acceleration.
That's a really interesting point, because I agree with what you shared. But I feel the real problem most people have is they know what to do, but they still don't do it. They're not going into the unknown. They know, like, let's use my industry, health and wellness, as an example. Yeah. People know they should move their bodies and not sit on their ass all day. They know they shouldn't stay up till 2 a.m. watching Netflix and eating ice cream after dinner, but they still do it. And so it's not necessarily lack of information or lack of knowledge of what is the right action. There's still something missing. And I'd like you to explain, your philosophy of why that is, and some of the strategies you found really help people to connect those dots and actually do what they know they should do.
Well, health is one that's really emotional to everybody and personal, because people have stressful days, and that ice cream gives you endorphins, right? And dopamine. So you feel better, right? So there's a lot of stuff rolling there. But at the end of the day, if the action a person wants to take isn't occurring, it's because they're making a decision to not do it. It's that simple. So it's almost like you cannot score in basketball unless you're playing the game, right? You cannot score unless you're in your game. So one of the big concepts I talk a lot about in coaching, especially coaching high performers and entrepreneurs, is like, you've got to get in the game. If someone's on the sideline, I can't give you any coaching until you're actually playing. And a lot of times people will be standing on the sideline wanting to be different. They want their body to be different. They want it to change. They want more energy, but they're not uncomfortable enough or focused enough to make the decision to remove the option of not doing it, right? So the first step for anybody to start to change anything is they have to make a decision that it's going to occur. At that point, then the actions will take place.
So with that thought process, why would you say people then make the decision we'll use weight loss as an example. They're uncomfortable. They don't want to be overweight. They want to feel better. And they start exercising. They start making better food choices. They start losing weight. They start seeing progress. And we all know people who 1, 2, 3 months down the road are doing great. They're crushing it. Their results are there, but they stop. They throw in the towel, or they just, not maybe consciously throw in the towel, but they just revert back to some of their old patterns, some of their old habits. What causes that?
Well, it could be a couple different things, right? When I'm not an expert in weight loss. I'm an expert in or health, anyways. But I'm an expert in mindset and changing, right?
Hmm.
And what I find in most people who don't complete weight loss or physical transformations is that their identity never changed,
Yep.
right? So if someone starts out and they weigh 250 pounds and their goal is to weigh 200, all they have to do is start acting like a 200-pound version of them. Where if they woke up in the morning and they weighed 300 pounds, they'd be like, oh my God, what's this 50 pounds doing here? They should literally wake up the next day and go, oh my God, what's this 50 pounds doing here? So the identity is the part that holds you true to it. And sometimes when people are doing weight loss, it's uncomfortable. It takes a lot of mental emotion, or they're going about it in a way that requires a lot of mental force to make it happen instead of flow and alignment. And when it
Mm.
requires that mental force versus flow, at some point, unless they're very determined, it'll run out and then they'll go back.
Mm. And how do you facilitate that flow?
By getting them into alignment with the target,
Mm.
and really getting into alignment is much easier than anyone thinks. It's actually it's not an addition game. It's actually a subtraction game. And the reason why I say that is because every one of us is like this infinite being, right? We look in the mirror and we never feel, there's a part of you that never feels any older. We know from 7th grade science that our bodies are made of atoms. But there is this belief that, I totally lost my train of thought there. What did you ask me?
Well, just overall, how someone can come into flow and alignment if
Oh,
they're
that's
if
right.
they're mentally struggling and the equivalent of pounding the pavement in their head to achieve this goal. And I
God,
know you
that's
mentioned weight loss isn't your specialty, so maybe we use business as an example. Someone's an
yeah.
entrepreneur, they're making 6 figures, they're like, I really want to make 7 figures, but I don't know how to 10x my business without working with 10 times the amount of people or charging 10x the price. So
Got it.
they don't know the way there.
Yeah.
And so I'm just curious to hear how you get people into alignment. Is there some questions? Is
Great
there some
question.
practices?
Yes, and I was saying it was an addition to subtraction game. It's a long day, and I'm a little tired, so
Yeah.
I lost my train of thought there. But here's the thing: is like we live in this attraction based universe. We live in there is a law of attraction, right? And the law of attraction is not meditate and watch Amazon show up, right? It's like desire, it's intuition, it's focus, it's thought, and all these things here. So basically, what you have to do is remove the resistance to that result happening, and then it will happen. A lot of people come to me and think they need to create success. No, they don't. They just need to remove the resistance to it occurring. So what's actually happened when someone's out of alignment with hitting a target in business or hitting a target in physical body, they have beliefs and reference points in their mind that are contradictory to that target. So all you have to do is remove all the mental contradictions, and then that will happen automatically.
Mm. And what's your framework for doing that? Let's say I came to you, Jason. I
Yeah.
said I want to double my business, and I understand it's a matter of subtracting the resistance
Yeah.
that's causing me to get there, not necessarily adding more things to the plate. Not this like offensive game. It's more of like almost a defensive strategy.
Mhm.
Where do you start? What do you tell people from like the square one as far as this process to walk them through?
Well, part of it is the first step is always education of how this works, because I'm basically educating people on a different way to approach life, right? And that's to aligning yourself with what you want. So the beginning foundation is understanding how to get yourself in alignment, because we've been conditioned to force our way to a target. Yet there's times where we were in this state of flow and magic happened. And we've also had experiences where we worked for a year and nothing happened, right? So what I've figured out how to do is to help move people into this space of flow and alignment. And the process itself is really a matter of getting clear on where you're going and then helping shift their frame, which the simplest way to describe that is the point of view you're operating from, right? Because our beliefs create our perception of reality. And we can change any of them, and most people just don't know how. But what I've figured out how to do is how to help people change perspectives, change beliefs, change mindsets very quickly by moving them to an elevated point of view of reality. It's literally a higher mode of consciousness. And when you start operating in a higher level of consciousness, a higher level of ownership of your reality, then letting go of these things that don't make sense anymore is just so easy. Like once I get a client to this point of view where they understand, yeah, my body is pure energy. Yeah, I believe anything can happen next. We live in an attraction-based universe. I've got a guidance system. I've got a brain. I've got intuition. I've got emotions. And when I start to follow those, I'll start to have my unique path. And we basically just figure out where the resistance is, and I help move the client into resistance, and then they go away, and the next call we do it again and again and again and again. And over time, we start to realign their mindset in areas around success and time and money and health and things like that.
That's fascinating. And is there a specific education or resource you would point people to who are hearing this?
Mm-hmm.
And I personally believe in everything you're saying. I've seen it work in my own life. I've seen it work in other people's lives. I know there's something here, but I know that a lot of people are like, it sounds very woo-woo, this whole, kind of manifesting reality, energy, all the words that you're using. I'm not sure if I'm sold. Where do you point those people to start to break those belief systems and open up their mind to these possibilities and start to shift some of their perspectives?
Well, the books that started to shift that for me, I would say my book is a great, although my book is really high frequency. Some people don't get it because it's a very high frequency point of view. One of the books that first changed my life was Conversations with God with Neil Donald Walsh. That book, I don't know if you've read it. It's actually not a religious book, but it really just talks about the power of human beings. Also, Journey of Souls, this book by Michael Singer, kind of talks about his theory. He's a therapist and he studies past life regression and stuff like that. And he wrote this book on regressing people through hypnosis and he directed them to between lifetimes, what happened between them. And he came out with this system. And when I read it at the time, 15 years ago, it made a lot of sense to me. And then, so those are some of the books that kind of started to open my perspective that I'm more than this physical body. And the more I started to explore that direction, the more I got excited about it. And if you want to believe it, and everybody says this, right? If you believe whatever you believe it, you're right, because your beliefs create your reality, your language creates your reality, and most of your language is automatic based on your brain's cataloging things for your entire life. So if somebody wants to change, they have to believe that it's possible. And sometimes when I get clients, they want to believe me, but they don't. So in situations like that, it's just they have contradicting old points of view that are contradicting it, that they're not aware are there. So sometimes it's a process of taking ownership and changing your beliefs. Sometimes it's a matter of just starting to explore a new perspective, right? Here's a new perspective on that. And if you want to explore that, great. And if you're not interested in that, you probably wouldn't be aligned with me anyway, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. So it really does come back to first step is more so removing some of these limiting beliefs and, mental patterns that are sabotaging people's growth. And then you'd say that's more important than the offensive approach of saying, I'm going to start adopting these, mindset practices or doing these affirmations or this type of journaling or whatever other practices you could fill in the blank.
It could be a combination of those, right? Because the diet can be causing the harm. Because the diet can have the self-judgment. The self-judgment causes the negative emotions, and the sweet soothes the self-judgment, right? So most people are wound up with contradictions because that's just how they operated one way, and they have a new better way. But when they start to approach life from a place of ownership, that they can start to change things, then we start unwinding. And then when you first start coaching, it's like Pandora's box, but literally within a month or two, you're in a radically different place because you start to see clearly what's true for you and what's not. And that power of ownership allows you to change things instead of living your life in reaction.
Makes sense. Well, I'd like to fire off some key points from your book and have you elaborate on a few of these so we can, have a little more context and a deeper understanding of how people could practically integrate this into your life. So one thing you shared that I resonated with was speaking your reality out loud is the fastest way to change it. Yeah. And I always visualize this SNL skit of one of these comedians, dressed up all dorky in the mirror saying I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like me. And so it's been almost, it's almost become satire. People make fun of this concept, but clearly it works, or you wouldn't have written this in your book. So explain why that's the case versus just writing it down or thinking it in your head.
So the repeat after me statements that I use in my book, and there's a lot of them in there.
Yeah.
There's like literally the last section's like 30 pages of them. Those are actually belief change statements with language written in a very specific way to change your mindset. Because I had a breakthrough about mindset a while ago when I first was working with Tony Robbins, that I realized that if I take ownership of a belief, I can change it. Right. And when I was around Tony Robbins, I didn't really see that. I saw you got to battle them and you got to go to UPW and do the Dickens process. And where I figured out if you take ownership of it, you can change it. Right. So, and I also had experiences where when I was a Tony Robbins coach, I would do Tony Robbins incantations. I would do, now I am the voice. I will lead, not follow. I'll believe, not doubt. I'll create, not destroy. And I did those incantations over and over again. At one point I was doing them 40 minutes a day. And what I've realized is that the way I was doing them before, I was doing them from a place that they weren't true unless I kept doing them. Right? It was coming from the point of view that if I was not doing them, they were not true. So what I've done with my work is I've used belief change statements to help clients shift their mindset. And what I do is there's also within the book are set up repeat after me's before it. Like in the very beginning, there's one that says, I choose to live in the world of immediate transformation so that you can change as fast as you want to. So basically, we're shifting the container of your beliefs so that it works this way. And then when we start to apply it specifically in subject areas, then it works better. So these are belief change statements. Now, if you're embarrassed by them, they're sake they're silly, then the book's probably not going to help for you. But if you do want to do the work, this is one methodology I found, and it's the best by far I've discovered to change beliefs like that.
Yeah, I got some dynamite ones from that section of your book, and I've been doing a practice. I want to get your feedback on this, Jason.
Sure.
So I've been doing something, I call it my morning formula.
Okay.
And it's essentially a series of belief statements similar to what you write about. I actually integrated some of the ones I learned from you. And, it's a combination of like a vision for my life, a credo, a bunch of affirmations, things of that nature. And what I do is I record myself saying this morning formula, reading it out on a recording app in a really like amped up, energetic state. Mm-hmm. And then every morning, within seconds of getting out of bed, I listen to this recording of myself saying these things. So I'm not verbalizing it every day, mm-hmm. but I'm listening to myself say it in my own voice. Okay. And I found that's worked well for me. I don't know if it's the most optimal route or if you have any feedback on that versus actually reading it aloud every day.
Worked well in order to what?
In order to accomplish the things in this vision I have set for myself that's constantly evolving, constantly changing, and also to rewire some of the limitations and mental beliefs that were hindering my growth as I was working through some of the things we're talking about of kind of embodying some of these philosophies and really starting to apply them and not just thinking, oh, that sounds cool.
Is it working for you?
Am I seeing progress? Absolutely.
Okay. Well,
could it be working better? I don't know. That's hard to say, but it's definitely having a positive impact. I don't have that's the hard thing with this stuff, right? Because I don't have like a case study B of me not doing it and rewinding a few years ago and seeing where I'm at in this trajectory. Would I be in the same exact place? Would I be miles behind? I have no idea. So the question is hard to answer in all honesty. Like, is it working? Yes, my life is improving. Yes, all the things I have in there are coming to fruition and working towards those things. But I don't exactly know where I would be without it.
Fair. And I would say that's, I meet a lot of high achievers and similar things, right? And if you find a way that works for you, that's fantastic. Where I would encourage you to check in on is, does it work if you don't play that morning routine? Right.
As in like, so what would be the metric? Would I be seeing like declines in my life progress I'm working towards? Is that what you're referring to?
Well, it's sometimes when we create tools and patterns that work, we unconsciously make them requirements for success. Mm-hmm. Right. I choose to operate from the point of view where we have no limits, where we're completely unlimited. So while you have a vision and you said, that it's constantly evolving, right? It's an evolving vision. The way I like to approach that is from the frame. Now, frame is technically, the way I would describe frame is the point of view. And technically what I think frame is actually the vibrational frequency of your consciousness, right? So you got action, we take. Action comes from your mindset, action, right? But then your mind, what you can think of, comes from your frame, which is the frequency of you, right? So what I like to do is to operate in a global frame that's non-specific, meaning I am going to hit that vision. And I believe that's what the vision looks like right now. I'm also open to the vision expanding and evolving. And I'd love to hit it tomorrow, and I'd love to hit it in 10 years, and I'm going to enjoy the journey. And regardless of that, I am going to follow that path. Yep. So do you notice at that level, it's a decision, right? Right. I am going to follow that vision, or I am going to transform my body and lose 50 pounds. How do I know that? Because I'm not going to stop until I do. Like, that's a decision, and a decision creates a certain frame, and a decision is 100% certainty with a frame. Your vibrational frequency is what reality responds to. So the way I like to approach it is global, non-specific frames. Yes, I'm going to hit this amazing thing. And then that allows you to have uncertainty and curiosity and unknown at the micro level as you fill in the pieces along the way. Right. Because what I pick up on when I'm talking to clients, and like, clearly you're successful, clearly you're making impact, you're looking to make more impact, and you found a tool that works, that's great. I just want to make sure that that tool isn't a requirement of it at this point. Because if that starts to get not working, then you can get into a place of like judgment or pattern or misalignment, and we start to create reasons and excuses why it's not moving faster, which slows our progress, when in reality, we could be perfectly aligned, but life just plans on giving you that in 2 more months.
Yeah. That makes sense. So in this example, would you almost advise, embodying the notion, like, I don't need this to stay aligned with my vision and my goals, and actually discontinuing it for a period of time, almost as like a test, or what would you say would be a good practical way to kind of assess this whole thing that you were describing?
It's really up to you, right? I'm not hearing misalignment with what you're doing. I checked in to make sure you weren't heading down to boxing yourself in the corner, because what I've actually found to be true is what you think about what you do is far more important than what you actually do. Because where we get out of alignment is the judgment of self, or lack of action, or action. I should be doing this or not. That judgment causes misalignment instead of just being open. Now, if you want to move faster than you are right now, I would encourage you to start connecting with a frame that knows how to move faster. And maybe for the next week, you get a sense of a version of you that knows if you should continue or evolve your morning routine. Because it's almost like we're playing in a multiverse with an infinite number of parallel realities. Kind of like that Spider-Man movie where there's the animated one and there's like the different Spider-Mans. And like, if you don't know what to do, you're in a version of you that doesn't know what to do. And far too often what humans try to do is we try to find the solution in the version of us that doesn't exist, instead of shifting into the version of you that knows what to do.
That's fascinating. So what type of self-analysis would you advise? With what you said really is an interesting statement, that your judgment of what you do is more important than what you're actually doing. But we obviously want to take inventory that we're taking the right actions and we're actually moving in the right direction. How do you do that without assessing, hey, I didn't sit on my ass and, watch YouTube videos all day. I actually got after it.
Well, needing to take inventory to see if you're in the right action comes from a place that you may not be in the right action.
Well, let's say I know what the right actions are. Let's use the health example, just because it's a simple one. I know I need to move my body in order to improve my health. I'm overweight, and it's scientifically proven that sitting on my butt for 16 waking hours is not going to move me in the direction I want to go. And I could do any type of movement. It doesn't have to be like a gym workout. It could be anything, but I need to move to some degree. So using that as an example, wouldn't you want to say, like, hey, I look back on this week and I I hit these targets, I hit this criteria that I set out for myself, working with someone that gave me this type of guidance of what's going to get me the best outcomes.
Well, keep in mind, like there's also judgments about things, right? There's the guy in India who smoked cigarettes and drank beer and lived 110, right? So,
Oh yeah.
so as much as we look, and I would really cautious, like now there may be patterns of behavior that have been duplicated over and over ago, and that shows that that pattern of action generates that result. Look at Joe Dispenza, and he completely broke the mold, right? So the point is that you are creating the field that you're playing the game on.
Mm,
And you are playing the rules to the game. You're creating the field, you're creating the rules. And what's usually happening for the average person is their entire perception of this is based on their reaction of it. Meaning they wake up, look at their life, look at their situation, their job, their body, have a reaction, they start taking action from a place of reaction. What we can now do is, instead of taking up action from a place of reaction, we can shift into a place of alignment of what we want. And which place, when you hold yourself in alignment with the version of you that knows what to do, or the higher frequency version, or the version that has a solution, it will eventually generate new thoughts and new ideas, which will generate new actions. So when I needed to get exercising again, because I'd been stagnant for a long time, I started focusing on the version of me that likes exercising. And I didn't take any different action. I just like, the version of me likes exercising over and over again. And all of a sudden my desire to exercise started to show up.
yep.
Because a lot of times we are out here playing in the details and trying to solve the details, but we're creating the source of it.
Mm. Yeah, it makes sense. Back to the identity shift that you mentioned.
Identity is a big one, but
Yeah.
identity is also a part of frequency. But with weight loss, it's like, we know that permanent weight loss happens when the identity shifts first. Like, it has to be an identity shift. And if you're coming into health, it's like, are they there because they want to be there? Did they have a health scare? So you can use coaching and you can use leverage, but the thing is, they're not going to change unless they want to. It just comes down to that, right?
Yeah.
So the real challenge you have, and I'm not a doctor or in your field, but the challenge is getting them to want it. Now, you can scare them if you want to, right? And you could say you're going to die, but it's like, coaching doesn't work unless they want coaching.
It's true. Yeah. Change has to come from within.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. I want to move on to another one that,
Okay.
that you mentioned. The universe is mathematic. Effort and worthiness have nothing to do with it. And this was an interesting one for me because, you know, we would all think like effort has something to do with it. Like, you got to try, you got to apply yourself to whatever you're looking to improve on.
Yeah.
So can you elaborate on this?
Well, when people think about money, a lot of people think they're not worthy of money. Money is one of the most loaded examples, right?
Yeah.
There's all this stuff around money, when the fact is, money has simply, has nothing to do. You're either aligned with making 50 grand a year, or you're aligned with making 5 million a year. Because and one of the hardest concepts to grasp that I'm spending a lot of time with lately is that frequency creates reality, not action. Because if we take action with our hands or our mouth, right? Take an action, our brain controls our hands. So our brain controls the actions. What controls your brain, right? Your brain is conditioned, cataloging everything you've done in your life prior to now, right? So it's basically trying to keep you alive. It's not trying to make you happy and successful. It's trying to keep you not being dead, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically like driving a car, staring in the rearview mirrors, right? The coaching work I do is I rip off the rearview mirrors so that anything can happen next. And just because the mindset, so if we're looking at what actually creates the reality we're in, the frequency of your thoughts creates the frequency of your mindset, which creates the frequency of your action. So when I say that the universe is mathematical, it's a system, it's a field. Like, life and the universe and creation is a system. It's attraction based, and we have the ability, the power to direct our focus, and our focus controls the reaction we have to reality. It controls the emotion, and it controls our frequency, and that then generates our thoughts, and etc. And most people start at the lack of action instead of starting in alignment. It's literally like getting in your car and just starting to drive before you put the GPS location in, right? And it's not that you have to spend 3 hours of alignment. It's literally, I'm going to hit that target. I'm going to figure it out. And then you get into alignment and happen. And I made that statement specifically in the book because a lot of times people will get all this emotion wrapped up into why they're not creating success, why they're not successful, why their body hasn't changed. And all of that just kind of muddies the process because really it's just all frequency.
Mm, mm. Got it. And okay, moving on to another one.
Okay.
The present is a result of the past, not an indicator of the future.
Yes.
And this is a really powerful one for people to understand. And I really like the way, what did I hear? I heard how Elrod talk about this.
Yeah.
You know, how you have to have this unconditional acceptance of your past and then this unwavering faith moving forward and just unconditionally accept who you are and where you are in this moment, coming to peace with that, and then putting this energy into this, maintaining this faith in what you want to create for your life, and then really living in alignment with who you need to be and what you need to do every day to move towards in that direction. And so clearly aligns with a lot of the things we're talking about right now. But I think that's always a good reminder for people, because it's easy for us. And to go along with this, you had written past models of success are not limitations, or are limitations. They're not accelerators.
Yes.
Which is interesting.
Yeah.
Because I kind of believed one and not the other. Upon first reading it, I was like, well, yeah, of course I'm not going to let past experiences dictate my trajectory moving forward. But at the same time, I was like, well, man, previous wins, those actually do give me, some confidence and some belief in myself and learnings and really positive momentum, this boost for current and future endeavors.
Yes. And they can be both. And sometimes they can, like past models of success being, well, then when I was most successful, I woke up at 4 a.m. and cold showered every day. And where that can start to cause a problem or resistance is when you're not doing that, you start thinking that you can't have success. Because it starts to it can sometimes put conditions or requirements on success.
Yeah.
The whole point is, that's the crutch, right? And the thing is, we don't know it's there. So we're trying to mimic it. But we're operating at a higher frequency now. Everything's different than it was 3 years ago because you're a different person. So sometimes we end up running and chasing our tail because we have this old pattern, when in fact, in the next moment, anything can happen. But just because anything can happen next doesn't mean it's likely that someone's going to walk down the street and hand you $50,000, but it doesn't mean it's impossible. And some of the biggest growth I've seen in clients is just opening up their expectations into what could happen. Because and the reason I call the book Do the Impossible, is because most people just assume the impossible is something that doesn't happen. So they don't even see it. So my point of view is aim at the targets that you want to hit. Like, hey, I'm going to grow my business. I'm going to lose 10 pounds. But if you really want to lose 40 pounds, operate in the mindset and the belief that it is possible, even though you don't know how. So it's really holding that alignment with the target with open possibility. Yeah, it's possible. I'd love if it happened. I'm going to take some time to figure it out, but I'm open to it happening. And that's where I find people are usually the most resistant in their expectations of what next, because they've just simply analyzed everything in the past, and they ended up shutting themselves down.
Well, it is hard. I can speak on this firsthand of having these big audacious goals of saying, like to this example, like, I'm going to make $10 million this year. And let's say someone's never made more than 1 million in 1 year. And it doesn't seem feasible, realistic. And they could say it, you can, write it down, you can say it out loud, but if you don't truly believe it, you don't really truly believe it's a possibility, probably not going to help you just to say it and write it and read it and, post it on your vision board and all these things. So how do you get people that truly believe it? If it's this big goal that they have no idea how to get there, they don't really believe it's even feasible for them to go from making 50 grand a year to 5 million a year. How do you get them to break that, belief system?
Well, the process that I use to set impossible targets is designed that way to generate an intuitive impossible target. It's not just them sitting here. There's a process there. So a lot of times the impossible target that comes up, whatever that number is or whatever the target is, usually has something personal to them. Because when we start doing impossible things, every one of us is unique in our own process. One of the most, literally the most challenging part of the process is believing it, right? I don't know if you remember Les Brown, the public speaker. He's still around, but Les Brown said, the easiest thing I ever did was make $1 million. The hardest thing I ever did was believe I could. And so the game that we're playing, especially entrepreneurs and, they're starting businesses and doing big things, when you believe it, because when you believe it 100%, you're in a frequency of alignment where it will happen. And creating that alignment, most people will create that alignment over time by getting some validation of proof. They'll see the step 1, step 2, step 3. So once you see it, it's easier to believe it.
Yeah.
So usually the process of belief happens over time. And then as soon as they believe it, that's when you have a frame of alignment that the universe can respond to. Whether you call it universe, life, or God, that's all these things, right? It's a attraction-based universe. So it responds to the frequency of you. And the key to getting a clear message is having 100% belief. So that's usually one of the hardest parts of the process right now. That's why I always, the tool I use is use a non-specific goal. Hey, I am going to create more money, more free time, better health, because I'm not going to stop until I do. Now, while it's non-specific, it is still 100% certain. But everybody's got to figure out, their faith in themselves too.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it, Jason. Well, this has been awesome, man. Where can people go to learn more about your work?
You can go to jasondreescoaching.com, and you also can I do a free weekly call every Monday at 10 a.m. Central called the Monday Mindset Reset. So they can go to mondaymindsetreset.com and it will give them an invite to that call.
Epic. I plan on signing up myself, and I'll throw those links in the show notes.
Excellent.
Really appreciate you coming on, man. This was amazing.
Yeah, it was great to connect today.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. If you found it helpful, please share it along to anyone else you believe it can serve. You can submit your own question to be answered on the show by going to ryankennedyhealth.com/podcast. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review for the show. Your feedback helps to support me on my mission to positively impact as many people as possible with this information. Please note, the information depicted in this episode is purely for informational purposes only. Please consult your healthcare professional before making any changes to your lifestyle or routine.